Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Player 2 podcast. I'm your co-host, Rade Stojsavlovich.
And I am your co-host, Dave Leary. It is good to be back with you again, Roddy. It is a busy week. I know we have lots to talk about. How is the weather in Seattle?
It is rainy. After a really nice weekend where it was 60 degrees and sunny, it is currently dumping outside there, very heavy rain, and I don't know if my dog's going to get an afternoon walk or not.
Excellent. Well, I think we're due for the same thing this afternoon in Texas, and for the next several days, we're going to have several days of rain. But it is good to talk to you. Good to see you again. Let's get into some stuff.
Yeah. Hey, just a reminder to everyone before we start, hit that like and subscribe button. Helps us out and lets us know how many of you want us to keep doing this and good things like that. All right. A lot of stuff going on in the news. This is going to be a little bit of a different podcast. There's a lot of technology and political news that potentially impacts the gaming business. So we're going to get into that. But let's start with just like normal stuff. There's rumors that Sony is going to pull back from doing PC releases and focus more on exclusives. It's just a rumor, nothing confirmed on that. Makes sense to me. Not a big surprise.
That almost seems like it's bucking the trend, though, isn't it, of kind of putting everything on cross-platform. They've had some pretty good success putting some of their stuff on PC in the last few years.
They have. And, it makes me wonder if this isn't going to be coupled with a shrinking of the size of the games that they're doing. Because, when you're spending multiple hundreds of millions on a game, just on development and then the same on marketing, you really need the biggest audience possible to recoup that investment. And PlayStation is the number one console. There's a lot of them out there, but people are buying fewer games because they're spending more time with games that they already have. Maybe this is the start of something we alluded to before about games potentially getting a little bit less expensive to buy, less expensive to make, maybe a little bit shorter, and we focus on just a great experience rather than trying to put the collected works of Dostoevsky or something in there and build these gigantic 100, 200 hour games. Anyway, we'll see about that. A couple other things going on in there. GDC is next week, so we're going to report live from GDC. I will try to find a spot that has decent Wi-Fi and is not too noisy this year. Unlike
are we live? I thought we were going to talk to you when you return, but if you can do a live report from GDC, that would be cool.
Well, we might do it from my hotels, which does not overlook GDC, but San Francisco, it's close enough. I think I'm near Union Square this year. So the fact that I was able to get a hotel there for a reasonable price is indicative to me that attendance is going to be down this year at GDC.
I would think so, though I always thought GDC was maybe a little more broad spectrum and interesting than DICE was. So hopefully you have a good time and meet some folks and see what's up in the gaming industry.
Yeah, we'll see what happens to that. One other thing in the news. So Paramount is getting bought or is buying Warner Brothers Discovery, and that means Warner Brothers Games is going along with it. Just like in the Netflix deal, when Netflix was going to be the buyer, almost no mention of the games business at all.
Yeah, and I certainly don't think this is a better merger than the Netflix one. I think that I have some concerns about how this occurred and how things unfolded with this deal, but I guess we will just have to see what happens. There's certainly a lot of intellectual properties that are either going to get carved up or hopefully something done with them. I guess we'll have to wait for the dust to settle to see what the result is.
Yeah, and if it even goes through, I mean, it's still got some regulatory hurdles, maybe not so much on the federal level, but at the state level, it does.
For sure.
All right, so get into a couple of interesting topics here. One of them, I think we'll start with the Supreme Court's ruling on copyright law and AI. And so I'm going to turn this one over to you, since in your former life, you do have a law degree here. So maybe you've got a bit better of an opinion about this than I do.
I have a much out of date, 30 plus year old law degree that I have never used, and I never became a lawyer. It is not particularly useful in this case, but the Supreme Court did decline to hear and revisit a lower court case on AI art, which means that the lower court decision will stand. And the gist of that decision was that AI art cannot be copyrighted. The key phrase in that decision being that human authorship is the bedrock of copyright. What this actually means for companies who use AI art to produce product remains to be seen. I think people are going to have to kind of catch up with this decision and figure out if they're exposing themselves to some fresh risk by not addressing any potential violations that they have in their products. I think this is an interesting example of some of the topics I know we're going to talk about today, which is that intersection of law, politics, and gaming. A topic maybe fraught with a little peril, maybe a little spicy, but I think we can endeavor to get into it without being particularly partisan on the topic.
Yeah, I think so. And it's important to get into this. On the legal side of this, it's basically what we were living before this ruling. It's the lower court's ruling on this. And so something that I talked about at GDC last year, I did a talk you guys could find online in partnership with Autodesk about ethical AI. And what we did at our company together is we started all of our art with human created art. It was 100% hand drawn. So these characters were ours. We had provenance on this. And then we used AI to convert them to animation. That still gives us copyright protections because this is human generated art. It's just animated a little bit differently. Wouldn't really be any different as if we just took that hand generated model and threw it in with mocap. What bugs me about this is not the outcome of the ruling, which I think is a good ruling. It's that we're relying on the courts, in this case, the Supreme Court, to interpret or leave standing on a lower court's ruling of a law that was originally written in 1790. It's been amended since, but it hasn't been really amended since the 70s. And the technology has moved so far, so fast, that what we really should have is a rethink of copyright law for the modern age through the legislative process and not just the court process. And that would open up a whole bunch of debate. And you could argue whether or not we have a functional government right now in the legislative branch. But assuming we did, I think copyright law needs an overhaul for 2026.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think the core principles for me of copyright still stand, and I do respect the concept of human authorship being the bedrock of it. And I don't think that's what you're talking about, and I certainly agree that it needs some adjustments to catch up with the digital age. I don't think that's particularly AI tech specific. I think it needs some overhauls to catch up with the way the digital world works and how things have evolved over the last 20 years. I do think that the path you laid out that we tried to follow with some of the work we were doing at Imposter is the right one. Companies that are thinking about these issues and want some protection for the product they make, it's best to at least start with some human work up front, thinking about the ideas, thinking about the concepts you want, planning for what the characters look like at the concept stage before you consider using AI pipelines. That buys you an awful lot of protection under this ruling, as I understand it. So definitely good advice from you, I think.
Yeah, and just like a lot of things in this space, I'm going to look to see what the European Union does because they tend to be way ahead of the US with regards to technology laws. And we often follow them. They're probably going to set precedent on this that I think will become the standard. I mean, it's a pretty darn big market. So if the US is the outlier there, we'll probably go with one of the more conservative ones for most developers rather than have a product that works in one market but doesn't in another. And GDPR, the data privacy laws, are a good example. I mean, they basically set the worldwide standard for that.
Yeah, I as you were talking about this, I was immediately reminded of the GDPR requirements. I think that you and I have probably both had to field some of that work before making a product GDPR compliant, which is, of course, all about data protection and retention of data, of the Europeans attempting to control a little bit how companies use data that they collect on a game, which in general I think is a positive thing, though on days when I was trying to navigate the exact requirements for that regulation, I would sometimes curse the GDPR because it was a fair bit of work, but a worthwhile work overall, I think.
Yeah, and just to be clear, my push to say this should be done through the legislation process is, as a business operator and a producer, I would like the line to be less fuzzy than it is about what's permissible, specifically with AI copyright, but also just in general. And it's never going to be like a perfect, solid, crystal clear line. That's not realistic, but it's way too vague right now. And I think you just operate a business better if you kind of know, I'm good here, but past this, like, it's not a good idea. Maybe something will work, maybe not. Do I want to take on that risk? It's too wide right now.
Yeah, for sure.
Then you get into other interesting ethical things with AI. There's the US government, specifically the Department of Defense, banning and designating that all its contractors can no longer use Anthropic's Claude AI because Anthropic refused to let the DoD, not forever at this time, use their AI for mass surveillance or autonomous weapon firing decisions.
Yeah, and I mean,
Oof.
this is an area where I have very strong opinions, and I will attempt to keep it as nonpartisan as I can. Though this particular decision makes it very hard. Anthropic's statement on this is well worth a read. You mentioned the two vectors that they were concerned about. Essentially, their two red lines: domestic surveillance and autonomous weaponry. They actually had some pretty distinct reasoning for why each of those was a red line. From their perspective, the domestic surveillance use of AI, they believe that AI would be very, very good at that, to the point that it is a risk for liberty and creates an ethical problem for them. On fully autonomous weapons, their concern was a little different. Their concern is more that, hey, this tech isn't good enough to rely on it for fully autonomous weapons. And if you use it in this way, you're not potentially just attacking the enemy with this, but you're endangering your own soldiers. You're endangering civilians. It is not a solid enough tech at this time to be even used in that way, even before we get to the ethical considerations. I thought Anthropic's statement was pretty good. They are clearly being careful with how they phrase things, with maybe hopes that they can get back on the military contract gravy train down the road at some point. But I appreciated their stance on this, and I thought it was pretty well reasoned. Once again, kind of cementing my view that of the big AI places right now, Anthropic is the one that's closest to doing things ethically and well.
So, in light of Anthropic's positions on this, their competitors, mainly OpenAI with ChatGPT and Grok, were pretty quick to pounce on it and try to get those contracts. Hasn't worked out so well for OpenAI. Reports are anywhere from 1 to 1.5 million subscribers to their product have left, and we've seen Claude, Anthropic's solution, jump to number one on the App Store. So it seems like a lot of people are like, hey, we like this, we don't like that, which is not surprising.
Yeah, I think that's right. And there was an excellent article in the New Yorker a month and a half ago about Anthropic and how they do business. Well worth a read if you can find it. I think that it's not always clear how something like this will affect the business, but clearly Anthropic has prepared for this, or has at least thought about the possibility of this. Reports I've read say that the military stuff was about a fifth of their business. Is that what you've seen as well?
Yes, about right. It's hard to tell because a lot of that's private.
Yeah, so I'm pretty confident that, particularly with the positive press they got for their stance, I think that they'll be able to survive this. And if I wasn't sure about that, I think the thing that gives me some surety is, as you and I have talked about a few times, I think Claude is kind of the best in class right now at what it does. It's starting to get more adoption, precisely because at the moment it's the model that works the best for the widest variety of applications.
So I want to double click a little bit about the second thing that Anthropic took a position on, and that's specifically about AI's use in autonomous weapons. Other than making fake games or fake weapons in video games, I'm not a weapons manufacturer or arms dealer or anything like that, just in case anyone was wondering. But one of the reasons for that is every AI that I have worked with has a deep-seated motive, for lack of a better word, to want to give you as a user an answer. Even when it doesn't know, or that answer, it's really reaching and scraping the fringes of the internet to find something that answers your question. It doesn't validate it. And some people call this a hallucination, but it's not really. It's something else here. So this is, remember in some of the, I think it was a year or so ago, somebody was asking health advice, and one of the AIs, I think it was Grok at this time, I'm not sure, it might have been something else, suggested that people eat rocks to get much needed minerals. Because, like, for whatever reason, like there's like that's got aluminum in it, and that's good for you, or whatever. Who knows? We ran into this very problem with our agentic AI controller that we wind up building for Imposter, specifically because all of our antagonist characters in this game kept trying to befriend you and not be an antagonist to you, because like just the models just really want to get to that point. We had to build a specialized controller that worked to prevent that. So, your bad guy is your bad guy in your story. If a weapon is fired and infers your desire as the operator to shoot something, to your point, at some point it's going to say, well, I don't really see anything else. Maybe that thing is as close as possible. I squint at it. Yeah, okay, I'm going to go blow that thing up. That's horrible. Like, you don't know what that thing is going to be. It could be a school or something equally abhorrent to destroy. So it's a really good reason not to do that in weapons today.
Totally agreed. And even given just the mistakes I see using even the best AIs right now, the things that need that human attention to correct, I understand why Anthropic would have been like, whoa, hey, guys, this just isn't going to work, much less considering the ethical implications of it.
It's just not there yet. Other interesting things with regards to tech and AI is, and just politics in general, is there's talk now that the U.S. government is considering forcing Tencent to divest U.S. gaming investments. Which, man, if that's true, that's pretty big.
Boy, that's not only big; it's potentially pretty destructive to some pretty significant companies in the US. Epic, Riot, Discord, all companies that have investment from Tencent, which of course has invested in just about everything in the games industry at one time or another. Wonder and speculate that to some extent this is just a pressure tactic. It's just a point of discussion for the US government to have with China about things that we would like to see them do. I am not sure that anything will necessarily come of it. There was the TikTok deal a while ago, which reminds me a bit of that. But boy, there would be an awful lot of change if Tencent were actually required to divest from US companies.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the TikTok example as a precedent, I think the difference here is I don't know who would come in as a buyer and pick up Epic or Riot. I mean, these are not going to be cheap investments, assuming they're not forced to sell them at a steep discount. I just don't see a lot of buyers.
I mean, the Saudis are the obvious candidate here, but I agree with you. I think that's a rough road.
If your argument is we can't have a foreign company own these, so we're going to sell it to another foreign company, like, that's weird.
It is indeed weird. And I think this is kind of getting at the theme that I think we're kind of talking about today. This discussion has several facets, but the biggest part of this for me is just that if you're a developer working today, you have to kind of be aware of what's happening in the world outside your development studio. You have to be thinking about how these issues, law and politics and purchases and acquisitions and government regulation affect what you do. You can't afford to ignore it with gaming being a global business like it is.
Yeah, so let's kind of tie this all together. So let's say you're a small independent developer and you raised money for your project. It doesn't matter if it's $1 or $1 million, but you've raised money and there's an investor in there. And that investor almost guaranteed has multiple other investments, probably beyond just gaming, because nobody that invests their money puts all their eggs in one basket. They tend to spread it out a little. If you're perceived as damaging their chances to do a bigger deal in some other sector that you're not aware of, and maybe you didn't even know your investor was dipping into those waters, your whole business is at risk now, because maybe they've got something at some other company that is doing a sizable contract with the government, and you're using Anthropic's Claude for your development, and you're the poison pill that kills the whole thing. Well, they're going to dump you. Like, that's not good. Or, what if you're tying on something to, you're building in UEFN, or you're using Unreal Engine, which is probably the more likely path, and that gets divested and it's not supported. What the hell do you do? So it's just crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of unfortunate that we all have to think about these things, because I think I'll just prefer to sit around making games. But we've talked a lot about the recent angles from U.S. politics, but this is a worldwide thing you have to think about. You mentioned the GDPR. You do have to consider things like that. I think in particular about China's government and their policies over the last few years. They have had a couple of notable gaming crackdowns in 2021. They went through a round of limiting playtime for kids to just a few hours a week. There was that round of restrictions. And then in 2023, a pretty big, fresh, and even more disruptive round of changes forced on Tencent and other publishers by the government to uh, ban daily login bonuses, certain gacha mechanics, spending limits on games. Um, so game design and politics collide on the regular, whether it's in the US or in China or in Europe. And unfortunately, I think we can't afford to ignore that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't even bring up California's new laws on child privacy protection that go above and beyond COPPA or the Children's Online Privacy Act. There's the UK's identity verification stuff, which if you're using Discord as one of your services for VoIP or community or something like that in your game, that you probably got to pay attention to and deal with. I can't imagine any gamer is going to be happy if you're using a piece of technology that requires you to upload a photocopy of your ID. I think that's a death sentence to your game. So you got to really watch this stuff carefully. And like the best advice I could give a developer looking at this is be adaptable, be nimble, and be ready to swap things out if the winds blow in an unfavorable direction for something that's not going to bring your whole product and your studio down.
Absolutely. I guarantee both you and I haven't talked to you about this in some detail, but I suspect both you and I worked on a product or two in our careers where some of China's restrictions in particular upended a deal or at least changed how we had to think about a product and made, at least in my case, us rethink a strategy for a product based on new restrictions coming into play.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I remember at one point getting a letter from some government official in China when I was at Westwood Studios about depicting the Soviet Union in Command and Conquer Red Alert in a bad light, and that because they were a communist country and China was a communist country, we also made China look bad. And we also got a complaint in the fictional map that we did for World Domination Mode in Command and Conquer 2 for not having some specific demarcation line between China and Taiwan or some I'm like, I didn't even know what the hell I was looking at. I'm like, we just, an artist drew those lines. There's not even real country lines. It makes no sense. But yeah, they seemed pretty pissed about it. I didn't take it that seriously back then, but like now, yeah, it makes a much bigger deal if someone over there can call up and say, hey, Epic, kill their Unreal license or something like that. Not that they're doing anything like that.
Is it China that has the cultural thing about skeletons? I seem to recall that.
Yeah, the Ministry of Culture had that thing.
Was that,
Germany was blood.
Yeah, Germany. I remember blood, though. I think they've softened on that some, right? But I do remember changing all the. I think somebody at Westwood had to change all the blood to black oil and make the guys do
robot sounds.
Robot sounds. That's right. That's right.
Yeah, so there's just a lot of stuff there, and unfortunately for smaller devs, there's no great central resource to get all this. You can engage a lawyer and get advice from them, but that's going to be really expensive, and they're going to tell you can't do anything if you listen to your lawyers. And so,
and the end result of not paying attention to it might be that you literally need to remove your game from certain markets if you get it wrong. So
yeah,
that's pretty scary stuff when you're talking about relying on a chunk of sales from country X or country Y.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be frothy for a while. Like we're just in a period with a lot of this technology and with governments of just uncertainty. I still don't think we've seen the end of regulation around social media, particularly with kids. Like there's that lawsuit that just was going on in California about that. I don't know how that's going to go. I haven't been following it that closely, but I know there's multiples like that. And I suspect there will be fall off from that into a lot of other businesses. I mean, there's a brewing one now with Meta and the AI or the glasses with video capture and data privacy on that. And you guys could go read about that if you want to. But I suspect there's going to be more stuff like that coming out, and we're all going to get caught up in it.
And as we mentioned, going all the way back to the blood in Westwood titles, this is not a new problem, and it's certainly not something that the U.S. is immune from. I think you and I have both seen rounds throughout the years periodically of bipartisan concern about shooters being actively training our children to be violent school shooters. So I think that rears its head every few years, and we have to have that discussion all over again.
Yeah. I think that's gotten more nuanced now. I don't think we're going to see Anybody calling an FPS game a murder simulator, though, like somebody always comes out of the woodwork when GTA comes out and complains about that. I think it's going to be more nuanced. I think it's going to be around protecting children and privacy, which, I mean, there's smart ways to do it. There's stupid ways to do it. We're probably going to do a little bit of both. I don't think anyone's going to argue about the need to have safe spaces for kids, but like you do it the wrong way, you make a mess of things.
For sure.
What I'm more worried about is either direct censorship or de facto censorship of technology or decisions around ideology coming from governments that might affect what we're going to do with games. Like, are you going to be able to do Mortal Kombat in the new Paramount acquired Warner Brothers game, or is that too woke for the business and they're just not going to want to deal with that, and then we lose a great franchise like that? I have no idea, but we're going to have to watch and see what happens there.
I think the takeaway at the end, Roddy, has to be, hey, if you're in the game business, vote maybe and pay attention to politics, which is probably good advice for everyone. Right?
Yeah, we don't lobby as an industry the way some of the other, certainly not the way defense contractors do in the US or tobacco used to do back in the day. I'm not saying we need to be like big tobacco and sell a lie to the people, but yeah, we need to make our voices heard. There's a lot of us. I think it matters, and like you can't afford to ignore this stuff because it's gonna affect you one way or the other.
100%.
All right. On to something a little bit lighter and more fun. Game of the week.
I have a game of the week. I did not tell you what it is, so I know you didn't play it. That would be why you didn't play it, because I didn't tell you what it was. But I just have a little surprise. I've been saving this one for a couple weeks. I was going to talk about it a while ago. It's been in early access for a couple years, but it's been in development for about 10 years. It's a game called Witchfire. I don't know if you've heard of Witchfire.
I've not.
Witchfire is a single-player, first-person, skill-based FPS. It's got a dash of roguelike and a dash of our new favorite genre, extraction shooter. It is got a pretty nifty, dark, gothic horror setting. It's inspired by probably games like Dark Souls and Bloodborne, both visually and mechanically. First-person Dark Souls is not an unreasonable comparison. It's built by a team, the Astronauts, that's based in Poland. They've been around for a while, but the only title that they have done previously that you may have heard of is The Vanishing of Ethan Carter, which is obviously a completely different kind of game than this. But their CEO and a couple other members of the team worked on Painkiller and Bulletstorm. Mechanically, you could see that DNA in Witchfire. I wanted to mention it in part because I love the game. I think it's a fantastic single-player experience, but I also wanted to mention it because it reinforces some of the development philosophy stuff that you and I have been talking about. I think they approach this in a great way, which I think will be the model for a lot of indies going forward. But they put together a very small veteran team. They kept this at about 10 people for a really long time. They have now grown to about 30 people as they build up during their early access release and work their way slowly and carefully with a lot of community involvement toward their full release, whenever that may be. They have not been afraid to do major significant resets with their mechanics during early access. But they did that with community involvement. And the end result, I think, of where they're at today speaks for itself. The shooting mechanics are top notch. The weapons feel unique. They are leveraging Unreal 4, not UE5, but they have got some great art direction and clever tricks to make it look fantastic in motion. It's in the type of genre I like, which is a mashup of genres. Those tend to be my favorite kind of games, striking a great balance between the familiar and fresh. So when you're done with Mugenics, Roddy, this might be a game you want to check out just for some fun.
So while you were describing it, I was looking at the Steam page on it. Very positive reviews with about 10,000 reviews. So good sign there. Still in early access. Very strong art style take. They went on it's cool. It looks good. Are the cinematics?
If you remember The Vanishing of Ethan Carter, they used the same trick there. They used that, the old school, go out and take a bunch of photos of actual props and use that as scans. It's kind of an old school, labor intensive, not using AI at all. In fact, their CEO is a little bit anti-AI, so that may not be something that you're necessarily gung-ho about, but they use kind of some old school techniques to get that art style across.
So this is an advantage of being a European developer, is I can't go out, neither can you, in the United States and go get a medieval village that we could walk around in.
Exactly. They definitely had some advantage. There's a fantastic video essay on their website, on the developer website, about them going out and taking pictures of little bits of architecture that they can find in ruined places nearby. Yeah, very striking art style. Definitely pushing Unreal 4 to its limits. I've been playing the game for a while, and I'm looking forward to it coming out.
The first bullet card in their trailer that comes up is single players. Like they're definitely leaning into their strengths on that one. I think that's a good thing. I like it when game devs get to do that.
100%. 100%.
Cool.
So that's the game of the week.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I got another thing to add to my growing backlog of stuff to play.
There you go.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks everybody. I hope you enjoyed a little bit different take on the podcast this week. Next week, we'll talk about GDC and any juicy rumors I hear while we're over there.
Ooh, juicy rumors are always good.
Yep. All right.
Later,
Take care,
folks.
everyone.